I recently had a client express regret in our session about the fact that her kids come from a broken home. And when you use terms like that in front of a social scientist, we're going to question those terms because we want to make sure that there's clarity about what exactly you're saying. And I said, "What do you mean by broken home?" And she said, "Well, the fact that there aren't two parents in the household." And I said, and so we spent that session unpacking the merits of what constitutes a healthy home and what constitutes a broken home. And I think that what she expressed is very much this idea that having two parents in the household is the gold standard. But that standard begins to buckle when we are focusing exclusively on the quantity of the household instead of the quality of the household. There are a lot of myths around what constitutes a healthy home. And so in this video, we are going to interrogate the term broken because a home is not broken by its structure. It's broken by what happens inside the structure. Keep watching. Hi, I'm Dr. Shantae, and welcome to my YouTube channel, or if you are new to my channel, what I do over here is I reframe cultural narratives through a trauma-informed and sociological lens. And so please know this is not a replacement for therapy because some of the issues that we talk about on this channel can be triggering based on your individual circumstances, and YouTube is not a substitute for therapy. And so if there's anything said on this channel that gives you something more to consider, to unpack, I by all means encourage you to seek the help of licensed professionals to unpack and do that work. So let's talk about parenting, okay? First of all, I'm a parent. And what I can say as the parent of a child, I don't know how you all do multiples. I really don't, because when my kid was 2 weeks old, I was on maternity leave, and I was sitting up there rocking and patting and rocking. And I said to myself, I'll never do this again. I knew at 2 weeks old that this was going to be my first and last rodeo as a parent. Like, this was going to be the last child coming out of this vessel because it's a lot of work. So I will be the first to acknowledge that it takes a lot of manpower to raise a child, let alone multiple children. When they say it takes a village, baby, it really does, especially when they start getting into activities and soccer and ballet and tennis and speech and debate and all of the things. And work demands are competing with your children's schedule and you trying to get them here and there and around the square. It really does take all hands on deck. And so this idea that a healthy household, or that the best of all circumstances, is when you have two people that are just united in that effort and are locked in and trying to make life work with the family that they created. Yes. I am very much in favor of that. So please do not be hopping into my comments talking about I'm advocating for anything other than healthy households. I am advocating for healthy households. But let's talk about the composition of said household, okay? Because while it does take a village, we have to interrogate the quality of the village, okay? Because as someone who does mental health coaching, I can tell you that I've had many a client who did grow up in a two-parent household and wish they didn't. Because a two-parent household that is child-centered, meaning rather than being loving partners engaged in the sharing of the work of raising the family and taking care of the needs of the family, it's more like the parents are co-managers. And so I have known households, many households, where the husband and wife or the spouses, they don't really rock with each other, okay? They are ships passing in the night. So maybe mom does the morning shift and dad does the night shift. And each one has the responsibilities of managing the kids' needs, food, clothing, shelter, making sure clothes are clean and hair is done. But in terms of like engaging as a family, it ain't that, okay? So what constitutes broken? And then there are households where food, clothing, and shelter is provided, but emotional needs are neglected. There are households where the parents are so focused on what you're doing. Did you do your homework? Did you do the dishes? Did you clean out the garage? Did you defrost that meat? Did you do what I told you to do? Where they're so focused on what the child is doing that they don't have anything for how the child is feeling. And when the child starts to express deep emotions, okay, or crying, they got a lot of shut up before I give you something to cry for. You should be grateful. You could be starving in some distant land. And so, okay, we got food, clothing, and shelter, but I don't feel safe to express my feelings in my own home. Is that a broken home? There are households where mental health challenges get no play in this ride, where it's like, you better take that to the Lord. You better talk to Jesus. Okay. We don't do mental health. I rebuke. Okay. A lot of spiritual bypassing. That's the name for that. A lot of spiritual bypassing where you're not allowed to say that you have depression. Oh no, we rebuke. Okay, so that doesn't even get acknowledged. And meanwhile, your child is on the struggle bus struggling with mental health issues, with anxiety and all the things. But because we rebuke and we don't entertain and we don't engage, and you better get on your knees and pray about that and walk away from it. Is that a broken home? Even if both parents are in it? Okay. And then there are households where you cannot be your truth. Okay. So if your parents feel a type of way about sexuality and your sexuality is going in a different direction, and if you express that this is who you are and this is how you feel, that you might find yourself on the streets. Is that a broken home? So I think that we need to revisit the broken home trope. Okay, I think we need to revisit that nomenclature, because I grew up in a number of years in a two-parent household. Okay, so the man that my mother married, my sister's father, yeah, I can trace my CPTSD straight to that whole adventure. Okay. Two-parent household, but this is where it was violent. It was chaotic. It was neglectful. I was abandoned because while my mother was literally nursing her physical wounds, I was left to just kind of like fend for myself. And rather than talk about what happened, like, I'm sorry that this is happening in our household. I know that this is wrong and I don't deserve to be treated this way. My mama just was like, did you do your homework? You got your lunch packed? Don't forget your key. But it was two parents in the household. So I think that when we use these terms, I think that we need to unpack and clarify, what do we really mean by broken? Because just because there are two people, okay, paying the mortgage does not necessarily mean that the home is stable, that the home is intact, that people inside the home are being cared for outside of food, clothing, and shelter. So if head count does not determine what makes a home healthy, well, what does? I think it's important as parents, whether your kids are grown now or whether they're still in the developmental stages of life. I think it is always important to ask yourself as a parent, what is my child learning about relationships from me? What is my child learning about love from me? What is my child learning about how they ought to be treated in a loving relationship from me? I think you should always be thinking about that. I think you should always be thinking about that, because many of my clients have come from households that stayed for the kids. Well, when you stay for the kids, what are you teaching them about how you ought to be treated? What are you teaching them about what loving partnership looks like or doesn't look like? Because you are their first teachers. The buck starts with you, okay? It may not stop with you, okay? But it certainly starts with you. So a lot of their orientation, their onboarding, what they are learning about how you talk to people, the tone of voice that you use to talk to people, the way that you resolve conflict in a family, they're learning that from you. And so many people, children, have never seen their mothers happy or never seen their fathers happy, never seen their mothers dream a dream, never seen their fathers dream a dream. You got food, don't you? You got clothing, don't you? There's this really powerful scene in Fences with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis. Fences is a play by August Wilson. It was brought to movie adaptation. And there is this powerful scene between Denzel Washington and the young man playing his son. And his son says, "Pops, why you don't like me?" And Denzel is like, "Like you?" I think his name is Troy. He's like you? Who said I got to like you? You got clothes on your back, don't you? You filling your belly with my food, ain't you? You got a roof over your head, don't you? Ain't nobody said I got to like your ass. And I was like, but do you know how many people grow up like that? How many people grow up in households where their parents don't even like them? He said, "You're my duty. You're my obligation." And so I have had clients that have communicated that, yeah, they had parents, okay, but there was no warmth. There was no love. There was no joy. There was no "I'm happy to see you." There was, "The food is on the stove. Go on, fix your plate. Let me see those grades. How much money you need?" So when we talk about a broken home, and then we haven't even opened up the lid on things like narcissistic abuse, because many people have been raised by narcissistic parents. We haven't even opened the lid on things like addiction. We haven't even opened up the lid on things like infidelity. So when we say broken home, I think that we really need to problematize that language. I think that we need to interrogate that language, because this society, this here American society, I don't know what y'all doing in the UK. I don't know what y'all doing in Central America. Okay. But in this here yet to be United States, this country has a real bee in their bonnet about single mothers. That there's this hierarchy, okay, that if you are a single mother, or there's a single parent, okay, you're a single parent household, there's a real stigma against you. That you are broken, that you have failed, that your children will amount to nothing. And I'm like, where are y'all getting this from? What is this? The 60s, the 70s? Where y'all getting this from? Because I've had also many a client where they said divorce didn't happen to me. Divorce happened for me, because it was the first time that my child saw me happy. It was the first time that my child saw me spending time with my friends. It was the first time that my child was able to see me on a vacation, laughing and splashing and just experiencing joy without having to manage the emotions of an abusive partner. And same thing with dads, okay, because it's not always men who are the ones causing conflict and abuse, okay? Women can also be abusive. So if you are the product of a single parent household, but in that household, there was food, clothing, and shelter, but there was also nurturance, guidance, intention, questions about more than what you did, but about how you were. If people cared for and loved you as yourself without you feeling like it was conditional, that it was tied to your output. If people showed up for you, if people supported your dreams, if people supported your personhood, that no matter who you were or who you were loved, embraced, accepted. I think that's a healthy household, no matter how many people are paying the mortgage. Okay. So we really need to come up off this high horse. We really need to come up off this language about what constitutes a broken home, because there are so many single parent households that are healthier and happier and lighter and better and more attentive, because the children are not watching one parent be in survival mode all the doggone time, sacrificing themselves at the altar to try to keep two parents in it. That's not healthy. That is a broken dynamic. And so and I think that we, at least Gen X, I can speak for my people. Don't know what y'all was doing with the boomers and the millennials, but we definitely normalized a lot of dysfunction. We definitely did a lot of looking the other way and sweeping under the rug because we came to believe that this is normal, that this is what people do in a household, and doesn't everybody live like this? And just because it was normal doesn't mean it was right, honey. Doesn't mean that it was okay. It is okay. Okay. It is okay to look back at your life, at your childhood with new lenses. Okay. Y'all know I can't see. Y'all know I can't see up close without these glasses. With new lenses and look back and say, you know what? That was wrong. That was effed up. The way that you treated my mama, the way that you treated my daddy, that was the way that you showed up or didn't show up for us. Like, you can't make it to my game, but hey, I brought home a check. Yeah, we needed more. It's okay to look back that there were a lot of things that we normalized that were destructive and corrosive and disrupted our sense of self, which brings me to my next point. Because a lot of people who come from these two-parent households that were fundamentally broken in the way that they interacted with one another and the way that they interacted as a family, well, they grew up, became adults, and how do you think they're doing in their relationships? So when you grow up in a household where instead of modeling love, you're modeling endurance, where all you have, what they say in Love Jones, all we have is all these years. Okay. So when there's not affection, when there's not loving sacrifice, okay, I'm not talking about that toxic sacrifice. I'm talking about, loving sacrifice, like, hey, I'm going to skip the company picnic because mom or dad is sick and, we want to be here and support her, or that sort of thing. Or, granny's not feeling well. So instead of going to the awards banquet, we're going to pack up and drive 80 miles to Wisconsin to go see granny, like that type of loving sacrifice. So when your children grow up in a household and all they see is endurance and struggle love, if that's what you want to call it, okay, and that sort of thing, well, it has an impact. It takes a toll. So I've had clients who have expressed their resentment towards mothers who stayed and let their fathers treat them a type of way. I have had clients who have sat in my chair and expressed resentment against fathers who may have brought home a check and didn't do nothing else, came home and closed the door. Honey, close the door. Like, I worked. There's food in the fridge. Don't ask me for else. Okay. So I've seen people have resentment around that. I've seen adults who, as children, learned how to abandon themselves, who learned how to be people pleasers, performing and jumping through hoops just for acceptance because they felt like that's what they had to do. I had to get the good grades. I got to clean my room. I got to clean out the garage. I got to sweep the floor in order for me to get just a modicum of attention and love and praise from my parents. And I also have clients who struggle with trust, intimacy, attachment, because of what they saw modeled growing up by their parents. So when we say broken, yeah, you got it. If you take nothing else from this video, hear me when I say different does not mean less. Different does not mean less. Different does not mean deficit. Single mom does not mean less. Single dad does not mean less. A home that lacks safety, love, nurturance, and guidance, and instead is characterized by volatility, meaning the kids walking in the house and they don't know what house they walking into. They don't know if the coast is clear or what mama gonna be feeling like, what daddy gonna be feeling like. Okay, homes that are characterized by volatility, instability, insecurity, chaos are broken homes. And that can happen with one parent or two, and does. So suffice it to say that by the end of the session, my client had a brand new perspective about what it meant to have her children live in a broken home. I said, the way that you describe your marriage, honey, that was the broken home. Okay. Anytime that there is any of the things that I mentioned, that breaks the home. That breaks the family. Yeah, y'all might be living under the same roof, but what does that mean? What does that mean? In name only? What does that mean? Okay, because when the actual fabric of the family, when the quality of the ingredients is lacking, that diminishes the quality of the household. And so if you are a single parent and doing the best you can, trying to raise these kids in a household that was better than what you grew up in, and doing your best to break the cycles of dysfunction that you thought were normal, but now you know better, and so you're trying to do better, please be mindful of the language that you use to describe your circumstances. Be careful of the language that you use to talk about it to yourself. Be mindful of the language that you use to talk about it to your kids. Be mindful of the language that you use to talk about it in public, because what we tend to do is we keep circulating these tropes. We keep circulating these ideas. And I want to say loud and proud, okay, because people always hop into the comments talking about, you're encouraging people to like be single. Different is not less. Different is not less. I love marriage. I love happily married people. Child, I have a friend getting married. I think she just got engaged. We ain't got a date yet. But when I tell you, I'm going to be sitting up there throwing the rice and blowing the bubbles and the confetti and all the things. Okay, taking the pictures, fixing the hem of her dress, all the things. I am team love. I really am. But I am team healthy love. You heard me? I'm not team struggle love. I will never be on that team. I will never be on that team, especially where children are involved, because so much of what is broken in the world came from what got broken in the home. And what is broken in the home is not the number of people under the roof, is what the people under the roof are doing under the roof. Does that make sense? I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you something to think about. I hope that if you are doing the best you can, please don't think that you are less. You're not less just because it's different. And for those of you who are in a struggle marriage, go back and ask yourself those questions. What are my children learning from me? Okay, if I'm coming home and closing the door, what is that? What message is that signaling to my children? If my children never see me interact in a loving way or an affectionate way with my spouse, what are they learning from me? I think that those questions are worthy of consideration. And I think that we should spend less time majoring in the minor, looking at whether or not there's a ring on somebody's finger, and looking at whether or not what this ring symbolizes is actually being demonstrated in the household. And if somebody is single and for the first time in their lives, their children are seeing them healthy and happy and whole, that is okay too. In fact, it's more than okay. So thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments, questions, takeaways, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.